When we are scripting in Grasshopper, what we want to do most of the time is to end up drawing some geometry into Rhino. But before we jump into our C# scripting component again, we have to know how we can tell Rhino that it has to draw new geometry. So we can do that with the Rhinocommon API, which you can find by the way in this website, developer.rhino3d.com/API. API stands for Application Programming Interface, and this is basically a tool that allows the user to interact with a certain program, in this case with Rhino. So if we click into the Rhinocommon API, now we can see that here there are many namespaces which define the classes that we can access to interact with Rhino in a certain way. So for instance, if I come to Rhino geometry and I look for, let's say, vector 3D, which is a very popular structure. So a structure is like a class, but which doesn't allow polymorphism and inheritance. So basically it's like a class for us. And now the first thing that we can see is the syntax, but for us it's interesting to take a look, of course, at the constructors, which is how we can define new vectors. In this case there are many possibilities, but probably this is the most common one by passing 3 doubles into the vector, which are the coordinates of this vector, of course. And there are also all the properties are defined here and all the methods. So for instance, let's take a look at, of course, the x property defines the x coordinate of this particular vector, and it allows a getter and a setter, which means that we can assign values and also get values from this property. And if we come back, we can see that there are another properties. So for instance, this property is valid, it allows only getter, so which means that we cannot assign a value to this property. We can just get the current value. Okay, and now for instance we can see that some properties are there is an s next to them, which means that they are static properties, and as we saw before, static properties make reference not to a particular object but to the class itself. So for instance, x-axis, it's going to return the same value, in this case 100, for every object that are an instance of this class. And of course we have different methods as well. For instance, we can take a look at the rotate method, first of all to the syntax, and we can see now which parameters we have to pass to this method in order to rotate a particular vector. And yes, finally there are some operators which specify, for instance, that you can sum up two vectors and so on. You can define your own operators if you want, but this is not something that you are going to do very often. Okay, and now this is the Rhinocommon API, which we are going to be using a lot later on. And of course we have also information about the different classes that we can use inside of Grasshopper, as we are going to see later on.